Welcome to Emotion Well, EFR's podcast about all things related to emotional well-being. I'm Johanna Dunleavy, the EAP Operations Director for Employee and Family Resources, also known as EFR, and I'm the host of our podcast. As an FYI, EFR is located in Des Moines, Iowa, and we are Iowa's first employee assistance program and provide a variety of services you can learn more about at www.efr.org. I am here today with Melody Vackel. Melody is the author of Still I Rise and a co-owner of Arise Cares. And Melody is here today to talk to us about navigating the caregiver support journey. Melody, welcome to Emotion Well.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is my passion, so getting a chance to share it is truly always a joy for me.
I'm excited to learn more, and I just bought your book, and I haven't dug into it yet, and we're just talking about how that's okay because I'll probably have more curiosities than had I read it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll dig into navigating that caregiver journey.
Okay. Well, as I said, I am a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, actually. I started out my career and spent 35 years as a speech language pathologist. So that is my professional background. I worked in early childhood special education. So tiny humans were my jam. And I did that for a really long time. And now I work in home care, which is our family business. We started it because our son needed care and we weren't finding the things that he really wanted and needed. And so we decided that we would start it ourselves with the intention of just providing services to Isaac. And now it's grown significantly. We have about 110 employees.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been just such a joy to see something that we needed for our son grow into something so much bigger. So my role there is Director of Aging Services and Outreach, which means for a very long title, basically, I work with families, help them understand how caregiving is impacting them. I help them find home care services and also do marketing and business development.
Right. You do wear many hats.
I do.
And you're St. Cloud based?
I am St. Cloud, Minnesota. Yes.
All right. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about your journey as a caregiver. You mentioned your son, Isaac, and I'm just curious, how long ago did you start Arise Cares, and kind of when did that caregiver journey start for you, and how did it start?
Absolutely. So I have 3 children, and Isaac is my middle. And when Isaac was 10 weeks old, he went to daycare in the morning. I had just gone back to work. He went to daycare in the morning, and I thought I would just check in on him during the morning and see how things were going and stop by. And he didn't look great. He was gray and struggling to breathe.
Oh,
And
my.
so I immediately called our clinic and said, this is what's happening. They said, get him to the emergency room right away. And at that time, I was still married, but my husband, I called him and I said, something's wrong with Isaac. We need to get to the emergency room. He happened to also be like a block away. So divine intervention there.
Yeah.
We got Isaac and rushed to our local emergency room, and everything was going haywire. His blood chemistries were absolutely out of whack, and they airlifted him to Minneapolis Children's. And that started the journey of being just a mom at the beginning of that day. And by the end of the day, I was going to be a caregiver for either the rest of Isaac's life or the rest of mine.
Sure. And can you share how long ago that was? How old is Isaac now?
Isaac is now 29. So
Oh, wow.
yes, he's thriving in his own way. And so amazingly, he is with us and continues to bring light and love to all he meets.
Yes. That I can't imagine. I feel like you must have had some kind of mother's intuition to go check on him, in the first place, and then just to pick up that something was wrong and to take him in. And so, so after that incident and kind of navigating what was happening, did it become pretty immediately apparent that there weren't a lot of resources in your community in St. Cloud for caregivers and people trying to take care of family members or loved ones?
I think what I noticed was we tried, initially it was just our family taking care of Isaac. We did that for the first about 4 years, because in order to actually qualify for any kinds of services, you have to get to the point where your child is significantly different than what peers would be able to do. So in order to actually
Oh,
be able to have access, we could have privately found caregivers, but in order to qualify for services, we
mhm.
had to wait. And so when he was about 4 was when we started looking for different agencies
Okay.
to come in. And there was a lot of overpromise and underdeliver that we noticed, and it just didn't ever seem to quite fit our family's needs and what we expected and what we wanted. And so that's really why Arise Cares was started, just to find and be able to choose our own caregivers and to hire them ourselves. Really had no intention of it going further than our family, but other families started finding out, and they also needed that same level of support, and they also weren't finding the things they needed. So they came to us.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you have three kids and he's your middle. So you obviously did you have a toddler at home when this all
My daughter
started or?
Brenna was 4. I'd
Okay.
actually had another child who had passed away the year before Isaac was born.
Okay. I'm
And
sorry to hear
so,
that.
yeah, thank you. So Brenna was 4, and then Isaac came, and then about 4 years later, our son Shane was born too. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and there are a lot of parents who are parenting one of their children, differently in terms of the amount of care that they need to provide throughout that child's lifetime. So I'm just curious, with Brenna
Mhm.
as your first child and then Isaac, how did that affect just being present and parenting your oldest child, while you're having to care so much for your infant and then, he became a toddler before you had that, access to care when he was 4 years old.
Mhm. That's really it was a struggle, honestly, but I don't know if I even realized how much of a struggle it was until years later looking back, because
Hmm.
in the day-to-day, it was just do the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Brenna did go to preschool, so there was at least a couple hours a day that I just had Isaac, and I did take about a year off of work
Okay.
completely, when he was born or when he got sick. And so I think just that space of trying to parcel out your momness,
Hmm.
right? Like, okay, you get a little bit and you get a little bit, but one of you needs more. And so I tried to be mindful of how I did things. If I was feeding Isaac, then Brenna got a book with me. So we got to sit next to each other. So I tried
Sure.
to build in some of those routines, but honestly, she was an incredibly agreeable little child at that point. Not so much at 2, but by 4, she was knocking it out of the park. So she really was Isaac's champion. She always has been. She would, lay on the floor with him and let him pat her face and crawl over the top of her, and just was such a great big sister, and still
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But I think it was just finding that space to try to remember that I'm a mom. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't even know that I conceptualized at that point in the journey that I was a caregiver. It was
Right.
just like, I'm a mom. I'm just doing the things moms have to do. I just have a little bit more on my plate than some folks, but
Yeah.
I just kind of kept trying to trudge through, honestly.
Hmm. Yeah. I think as I'm a mother, and I think, as a mother, you just assume this identity once you have a
Mhm.
child. And, whether you're doing additional caregiving, above and beyond what may be typically needed for your child, or, maybe you have a full-time partner that's supporting you, you just kind of automatically go into that mode. And I think a lot of times, at least I'm speaking for myself only here, you kind of lose a sense of yourself,
Mhm.
and, who you were before you became a mother. So when you were saying you had to parcel off time for your daughter and then you're caring so much for your son, when did it kind of catch up with you that, wow, like I'm maybe not giving a lot back to myself? Or did you feel, I don't want to use the term burned out, but that's what we say,
Mhm.
in the workplace, right? Feeling burned out. But you can reach that level of stress and exhaustion in any aspect of life. But when did you start to feel like, whew, I'm needing some supports or I'm experiencing caregiver fatigue?
Mhm. It's interesting. I think about that now and I look back and I think, really? I was a slow I was a slow learner, and I don't think I honestly conceptualized it until I actually watched my caregiver following my car accident, which we'll, I'm sure, chat about in a minute. But when I watched my caregiver, I had this like aha moment going, oh, I was supposed to take care of myself in that part of my life. I was supposed to be able to do things too. I was supposed to have outlets. And I think that's a space that a lot of caregivers sit in, and they don't really even give themselves permission to feel or experience all of the challenges that are coming
Mhm.
at them, or the burnout, or the fatigue, or the fact that there's just this constant, it just felt like do the next thing, do the next thing, do the
Uh-huh.
next thing. And I don't even know if I recognized it, not in the way that I do now. And I think
Sure.
society wasn't really at that place. There was not a lot of talk about self-care and nurture yourself and you deserve a break. When Isaac was born, there really wasn't. Almost 30 years ago, I think we were keep grinding,
Yeah.
get to work, do the job, do all the things, be the mom, have a job, do activities, take your kids to their activities.
Mhm.
It just was this kind of cycle of that's what you did.
Yeah.
And so it just felt like, okay, I just have more lists, more words on my list than maybe some folks do, because it's also therapies for Isaac and the exercises and the activities and all of the things that I needed to do to make sure that he was thriving to the best of his ability and the best of my ability to care for him.
So we will talk about when roles were reversed and you
Mhm.
were being taken care of. But before we get to that, I would just want you to share with our listeners, like, what is your definition of self-care? And when you think about caring for yourself, what does that mean? What does that look like? I think it's always interesting to hear people's perspectives on this. And I think it can help people have those aha light bulb moments where you're like, well, that's what it is, you know? So share
Right.
with us what self-care is.
Now you're talking my love language. I love talking about this stuff because I think it's so important. And so few people actually prioritize themselves, whether you're a caregiver or whether you're, you know, just a regular human walking the planet. I think for me, self care has changed dramatically. It used to seem to be like people like, oh, take care of yourself. First of all, what does that mean?
Hmm.
If you're not doing it, you don't really know. And so there's
Hmm.
that space. And then it was, oh, go get a massage, go do a thing, right? Get to an
Yeah.
activity. Well, when you're already stretched thin, the idea of doing something else, even if it's something that you might enjoy or that's good for you, is not necessarily helpful. And so I thought about it as an activity for a while. I'm like, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to go do those things because I'm busy, I'm caring. But then I started thinking about it not necessarily as something you get to do after all the things you have to do, right? I think of it now as not a reward, but as a responsibility to yourself and to those that you love. Because if you truly aren't prioritizing yourself, if you're not thinking about how you can show up as your best self, then you're missing the boat.
Yeah.
And I think that space of, I talk a lot about now about space, physical space, mental space, emotional space as ways to practice self care. How do you set up your environment to have a quiet corner, a place where you can sit, whether it's 2 minutes with a cup of coffee, whether it's paging through a magazine? How do you set up your environment to nurture yourself? Because you can't necessarily always leave when you're caregiving. Or how do you set boundaries? How do you say
Hmm.
no to the things that don't serve you? How do you tell people in a kind and respectful way, I don't have the space for this right now?
Yeah.
Or mentally, what are you doing to think positive thoughts? How are you practicing gratitude? Are you being mindful? Can you just sit and pause and take a few deep breaths a couple times a day? Because sometimes that's enough to just be that first glimmer of self care,
Yeah.
that moment where you can say, oh, okay, I can just rest for a minute,
Yeah.
and you don't have to keep doing. So I think about it much differently. I think about it more in terms of how can you structure your life to allow space for yourself to move through it, weave through it, and continue to do the things that you have to do to care for someone else.
Yeah. I like how you said it's not a reward, it's a responsibility. And so we facilitate trainings at EFR, and I am our Self Care 101 training facilitator. And there are some things that I talk about in that training. I always remind people that self care is not selfish, but sometimes we feel like we're not allowed or,
Mhm.
owed that opportunity, but it's not selfish. At least in most instances, it's not selfish.
Right.
Obviously, if you're maybe neglecting everything and everyone that maybe you are responsible for your own self-care, then maybe that would be another story. But in most instances, self-care is not selfish. And then I also feel like people assume like they associate it with something luxurious, like you said, like getting a massage or a spa day, and like that is a great form of self-care, but no one can
Yes.
do that on a regular basis. At least no one I know. So it's like, what are those found moments or opportunities? And I like how you said taking the deep breath, or just giving yourself time to pause, or the boundaries. I remember so back in 2021, and this is a story. I don't know if I shared this with you when we chatted the first time, but so my dad went into the hospital the day after Thanksgiving for just a standard same day surgical procedure. And he ended up, unfortunately, developing sepsis from the procedure. And my dad was 83 years old at the time. And so he ended up passing away. But it was over the course of 7 or 8 days later after the surgery, he passed away. But he was in ICU and then just transferred over to palliative care. But he like I had gone home for Thanksgiving thinking I was just going to see my dad for Thanksgiving, take him to his surgery, return home. I wasn't prepared. This is 250 miles away from where I live, so I wasn't prepared for this. Mentally, I wasn't prepared for it. Professionally, I didn't expect to take that much time off work. I didn't have like enough clothes, right? It
Right.
was just an unfortunate situation. Um, Ultimately because my dad died, but I remember during that time, like I spent the first couple of days at the hospital and I was so exhausted. And this was back when COVID was still, a big issue and you're masking and I was like sleeping in a mask and and I just remember there was one day where I had to make a decision to like take a break and leave
Hmm.
the hospital and go drive back to his house, which was about 45 minutes from the hospital, and just like sleep there every night. And it
Hmm.
was a really hard decision for me to make because I did feel like I was being selfish. Like I was leaving my dad, I wasn't staying like vigil at his bedside, but I was like, I know what the outcome of this is going to be, and it's going to be so hard and sad. And if I'm emotionally and physically more drained than I already am,
Hmm.
I don't know if I can get through this. So I made that decision to just go back and sleep, in a bed every night. And
Hmm.
I had to work really hard to let go of like the guilt, from that. But ultimately, I needed to do what I needed to do. And so I share that story when I present my self-care one-on-one
Hmm.
because it's like self-care looks different for everyone. Like my sister was with me and she chose to stay at the hospital and then her self-care looked different than mine. She would just leave for a few hours during the day. And so it was like we both had different definitions of self-care. We both had different ways to practice it, but we both practiced it just differently. And neither was right or wrong. It was just different. And I think it's important for people, whether you're in ongoing circumstances, caretaking kind of inevitably, or if it's more of a short term, there's been some kind of emergency and
Hmm.
you're, maybe in a hospital for a week or so with a loved one, what are those found moments, right? What can you do to practice self-care? So, uh, yeah. Well, thanks for letting me share that story. But
Yes.
I think self-care looks different from person to person, and that's something that people sometimes I think associate with like maybe the guilt of like, well, self-care can look one way for me and a different way for another person. So,
I think
um,
that's really a great perspective. And I'm sorry for the loss of your dad. That must have been really hard to have something happen so quickly.
yeah, it
And that
was.
space of honoring yourself, I think, I love that you could reach that point to be able to say, like, I need to step away, and this is going to be the best for me and everybody else, because then I'm
Yeah.
going to come back and I'm going to have a little gas in my tank so I can sit there and be present and hold that vigil of space for him. But it's hard to not judge ourselves and feel guilty. And I think so much more about how we are failing than how we're succeeding. Unfortunately, that whole negative
Yeah.
bias that we're born with that keeps us,
Yes.
away from the cave bears and things like that back in the
Yes.
day. But I think we defer to guilt and shame a lot of times. And that is just really not a healthy space to be in. And we would never say the things to other people that we say to ourselves.
That is so true.
If your best friend said, "Hey, I have to leave the hospital at night so I can sleep," you would never say, "Oh my gosh, you're a horrible person. Why would you ever think of leaving your loved one? That's terrible."
Right.
But we'll say it to ourselves and like that ride that rail of like, should I,
Sure.
shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And we need to be better at being self-compassionate and kind to ourselves in a loving way, like we are to our friends. And
Yeah.
honestly, the cashiers at the grocery store, sometimes I'm nicer to them than I than I am to
It's true.
myself.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. Self-compassion and even self-awareness. I think, self-awareness can be a
Yes.
great first step in self-care because it's recognizing what you need, when you might need it, and doing it. Talk a little bit about how, self-care is part of the caretaker process, not
Mhm.
kind of after the caretaking is complete. So
Right.
talk to me about that because I've heard you. I did listen to another podcast you were on, and I thought that was really a great lesson, to remember is like, oh, it's not when everything is done, it's throughout the way. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I think, we think about if you look at your day, you have a calendar, right?
Yep.
You know exactly when you're responsible for doing things for other people. You know exactly when things have to be finished. You're always thinking about the next thing. You're looking ahead to the next day. At night before I go to bed, I look at my calendar. Okay, what am I responsible for tomorrow? What needs to get done? Where on that list do you fit? Are you ever on the list?
Yeah.
Can you see the list in the distance?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, someday, someday, or it's completely absent from our minds. And I think we, as humans, we are hardwired to just produce and do, produce and do. And we need to start to shift that mindset because it's incredibly unhealthy for us, whether we're caregiving or not. There has to be downtime. I don't care if it's 3 minutes at the beginning of the day that you sit and you are, whether you're on a meditation cushion, whether you're taking a walk, whether you step out on your deck and grab a couple of good deep breaths before you, start your day. But where in the day are you putting yourself? I like to think
Mhm.
about micro self care because sometimes, like, oh, well, I want to go to the gym or I want to do this, whatever. I only have, 10 minutes, so I can't go for a long walk or I can't do some of those things that maybe take more time. But we all have pauses in our day. We take little breaks. So if you schedule those in, I always encourage people to like look at your calendar and figure out, okay, I'm going to put 5 minutes here. I'm going to put five
Mhm.
minutes here. I'm going to put 5 minutes here. Put that buffer around your appointments. Give yourself 10 minutes between appointments. So you can, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water. If possible, step outside, do a little
Sure.
deep breathing, get some fresh air. If you put those little things in throughout your day, in the same way you would schedule an appointment with anybody else,
Mhm.
you're going to be far ahead of the game. Or I'll be like, okay, my exercise for today is bicep curls. So when I do my micro self care, I take a stretch, I move away from my computer, I get a drink of water. Hydration is so important. Get that water. And then maybe I do 3 bicep curls. So
Yeah.
if I take that break every hour and 15 minutes, that's the other thing. Set a timer. Don't rely on yourself to stop.
Yeah.
Set a timer so you know when that break is. You do your little things. It literally takes maybe 5 minutes, and you've gotten hydration. You've gotten a break. You've done a little stretch. You've moved away from
Mhm.
your screen. So you're getting your eyes, refocused and reset. You do a couple of movements of something. And by the end of the day, at the very least, you've probably done at least 10 or 12 bicep curls. And
Yeah.
maybe the next day I'm going to do wall push-ups or I'm going to do,
Yeah.
so I try to fit my fitness little spaces in there as well. But just thinking about it in tiny doses, right? Those tiny habits you can establish make a huge difference long range. And then when you have an hour or you have half an hour and you want to take a walk or you want to get together with a friend, maybe you do a Zoom chat with a friend and have coffee. My sister and I will
Yeah.
do that. We'll have coffee together over Zoom because she lives on the East Coast and I don't get to
Yeah.
see her very often. So just taking that time to fit those things in in tiny doses, micro self-care. And then when you have an expansive time, by all means, like I get up early in the morning, I go try to get out for at least an hour, 45-minute walk just to
Yeah.
get before the day starts. So structure those things in. And when you're a caregiver, you maybe can't leave to do that. So you can always fit micro self-care in
Yes.
tiny doses.
Yeah. I also think, if your self-care routine is dreadful, then it's probably not the right routine, because
Amen.
sometimes people don't look forward to the things that they think they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then those aren't the things that you need. You find something that you really enjoy. Maybe it's, doing the Wordle,
Right?
that's a way that I practice self-care. Like I just get my New York Times game app out and I spend 10 minutes on that. So it looks different. And I like the idea or the concept of micro self-care because we're busy people, no matter
Yes,
what stage of life you're in. There's things that fill up those hours in the day. And then I also think sleep is a great form of self-care because it feels like
absolutely.
sleep is the one thing that people will let go of or give up. If they feel like they have to get more done, it's like, well, I'll just get up early or stay up later. So I think sleep is important. And sometimes I feel like even like putting laundry away can be a good form of self-care because if I feel like I have like physical clutter in my,
Yes,
home space,
yes.
it really does affect my mood and affect my ability to focus. And so even a small household chore, I can sometimes twist into, well, no, that was self-care. I put my laundry away and it was really bothering me that it wasn't done. So
I would agree. I am a person who I think clutter in, clutter out. So if I look around my space and I start to see piles are accruing and I'm like, oh, that didn't get put away, that didn't get put away, I know that I'm in a starting of a swirl, right? I'm
yes,
I'm starting to
yes.
like, this is a sign that something isn't going well. I need to clear the clutter. So I'm a bit, I agree with you on that. And also mindfulness, you can
Mm-hmm.
mindfully fold laundry. You can just be
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I'm folding this leftover right. I'm, thinking, putting just thinking about what you're doing as you're doing. So staying in that present focus also is a way to kind of reset because you're not thinking about all the things you have to do. You're not thinking about the person who needs care. You're not racing with your head to think of all the things you have to do next. You're just consciously pausing in that moment. And if you attend to it, you set that intention to pay attention, right?
Right, right. Yeah. It's about intentions and paying attention to what you need. Yeah.
Exactly. So I am with you on clutter and I agree. Washing dishes for me, like I can't stand having waking up in the morning to dirty dishes.
Yeah.
So if my dishwasher's full, I don't care if it's 11 o'clock at night, I will wash my dishes, clean off my kitchen counter because nothing is more annoying to me than waking up in the morning and seeing mess.
Yeah, like starting your day a little bit off. Yes,
Exactly.
I would agree. I would agree. The other thing you said that just reminded me of, I kind of hear friends chat from time to time, friends that are in a caregiver role, whether it's for
Mhm.
kids or aging parents, but make sure that you're scheduling your own doctor's appointments too, because, we can get so caught up in scheduling and fitting in our loved ones' appointments, but you still need your annual exams and,
Mhm.
don't neglect, maybe some physical health symptoms or mental health symptoms that you may have,
Absolutely.
because you feel like you have to prioritize someone else's health over yours. It's your health is a priority too. So I think that's also a good
Well, and I
reminder.
think a lot of times people don't think about it, but statistically, a lot of people who are caregivers actually pass away before the person they're caring for because they do
Oh,
just that. They neglect their own health care. Oh, this nagging feeling or this pain. I'm like, okay, well, it's probably just this, it's probably just that. Or they're just so almost enmeshed in that caregiving space. You have to remember that you are your own person and
hmm
your person you're caring for is also their own person.
hmm
They overlap, they come together, but maintain your own identity beyond I'm a caregiver.
Yeah,
It's a part of who you are, but it's not all of you. And I think that
right.
that space is sometimes one that people forget about that, like, I'm more than the service I offer, I'm more than the care I give. I am a human with, my own dreams and ambitions and thoughts and feelings. And those are just as important as the person who's sick or your children or, whoever it is you're caring for. You
Mhm.
have to prioritize yourself. You are the only you that's here. And
Yes.
if you go down, it's going to be far worse than if you just, persevere and take those
Yeah.
pauses.
Yeah. So let's talk about your journey as someone who received care. Walk us up to that turning point
Sure.
in your life.
Well, as at that time, I had been a caregiver for 20 years. So I'd been doing it a long time and, was basically felt pretty good navigating it pretty well. I mean, I was obviously had a lot on my plate. And I was driving between work sites one day. I had finished up at one school. I had one more student to see. I drove down the road and stopped at a red light. And unfortunately, the truck trailer behind me did not stop. And so I was hit from behind and pushed into three vehicles in front of me and immediately had no sensation from my shoulders down. And the voice came on, the OnStar lady came on and said, we've had an accident. Do you need help? And I just kept saying, I can't feel my arms. I can't feel my arms. And then I said, find someone to take care of Isaac because I was terrified that, I was down. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. But
Yeah.
my immediate thought, which again speaks to the vigilance of caregivers, right? That immediate attention to somebody else. But so I thankfully am no longer paralyzed. Like, this all works.
Yes.
That was a temporary piece, but I suffered a traumatic brain injury. So I spent a number of weeks in the hospital and probably about 5 years in rehabilitation, working on all of the physical and motor needs and cognitive needs and all of the changes that I had to go through with that injury and working on reading again and walking again. And it was incredibly daunting. I never realized the amount of effort that I had put into caregiving until I watched my caregiver. And that space of fear of now, not only am I needing care, am I going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Am I going to be the one that, tanks my family because now not only is there Isaac who needs care, I need care.
Mhm.
And how is that going to work? Who's going to manage doing all the things that I was doing? How does that work and what does that look like? So being in the space of receiving care, honestly, for me, was almost harder than being a caregiver
Yeah.
because not only did I have to relinquish control, which let's face it, we all if we're caregivers, we probably have at least some strong sense of needing to control
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So I had to
Or
release that.
overfunctioning,
Right,
patterns of
overfunctioning,
overfunctioning. Uh-huh.
exactly. So I was just incredibly fearful of what that would do to my family. So there was just
Mhm.
a lot of angst emotionally, as well as dealing with all of the physical symptoms and everything that went along with that. So that was, yeah, the start of the reframe. And that's really what led me into the work I do, which is supporting caregivers and speaking and coaching and helping people try to find and navigate that new normal that can come, with life. And I wouldn't have known it. I mean, I would rather not have had gotten hit by a truck,
Sure.
let's just
Sure.
say. However, in every challenge, I believe you can find a celebration. And for me, that celebration is I came to the realization that I had value. I came to understand that I was worthy, whether I was caring for someone or just existing. And those aha moments really shifted my whole focus of how I want to live my life, how I want to serve others, and what I want my journey to mean.
Yeah. So, what, as someone who's been on both sides of caretaking and care receiving, what do you
Mhm.
think would be a helpful suggestion to someone who knows a caregiver, sees a caregiver, and wants to help them, just whether it's help them, logistically manage the caregiving or just help them remember that they're important too and that they need to take care of themselves. But what do you think could be a helpful tip for those people who are witnessing caretakers?
Mhm. Well, I think one thing is don't say, let me know if you need anything.
Because they'll never let you know.
They'll never let you know. It will never happen. And you'll just be another person who says that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that, yeah, like it's hard to ask for help, let's face it.
Yeah.
Whether you're a caregiver or whether you're just, living life, it's hard to be vulnerable because you're afraid and your whole identity is wrapped up in being a caregiver. And if you're saying, I need help, or if somebody appears, asks you, oh, how are you doing? You don't want to say, honestly, I'm not doing well at all. You want to like, I'm fine, good, all's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that for years, and I think so many people do that. So first of all, I would say, don't just say, let me know if you need anything. Don't put the onus on them, because then it's just one more thing
One
they're
more thing
supposed
for
to
them to
do.
do. Yeah.
Right. So I would encourage things like, if you know what their day to day is, maybe they have other children who need rides to soccer practice or need a pickup, or maybe that, money's been tight because things with caregiving can be expensive. If you've got loved ones or people aren't working because they're caregiving, send them a gas card in the mail, send
Mm-hmm.
them a DoorDash card in the mail, just like thinking of you, and send it over. So some of those things that don't require them to accept the help that just
Right.
come automatically, can be really helpful. Or offering to come over and sit with their loved one.
Sure.
I want to come over, just and give them a time versus like, because again, if you just say, I really want to come over and I'll sit with your, loved one while you take a shower or take a nap or whatever, they may not agree to that. But if you just say, I'm going to come over one day this week so you can take a break. I don't care if you leave. I don't care if you take a nap. I don't care if you take a shower. I don't care if you
Right.
go sit on your porch. I'll just be there as an extra set of hands. And you don't have to go if that makes you nervous, because sometimes cares can be specific.
Sure.
And, but even if there's someone there where you can just, step away for a little bit. So just offering and give them a time frame, like, does Tuesdays at work or Thursday work? What does your schedule look like? Which day is a good day for me to come? Or I'm bringing dinner this week. Which night would you like it? So
Yeah.
kind of try to condense it a little bit so they don't have the ability to just be like, oh no, I'm fine. It's okay. You don't have to do that. And then just being able to listen. Like, I just,
Yeah.
if you need to talk, I'm here. Or send a text and don't expect a response. Send a card,
Yeah.
thinking of you. I know
I
things
think
are hard right
sometimes
now,
people do want listeners. Like, I think when someone is overwhelmed and just wants to talk, they're not looking for someone to provide them with suggestions or solutions.
Yes.
They just want to talk. And I think people are often uncomfortable in those situations and they want to be the helper and they want to figure it out and problem solve. But no,
Right.
sometimes it's just, this is what's going on in my life. And that's what I wanted to share. And I didn't need anything other than that 5 minutes to tell you,
Right.
So,
Well, and I think we get uncomfortable with that because we think that we're supposed to fix things. But if you
right,
approach it kind of from that coaching mentality of like, don't offer advice without asking, first of all, is a good tip to remember. So if you do have something that you think could be helpful, you could either hold it for another time, because usually it's not that crucial that it has to be said right away.
right,
You could come back later and say, hey, when you were talking the other day, I thought about something that maybe would be helpful. Would you like to hear about it?
right.
Could I offer a suggestion that worked for me or something like that? But again, offering unsolicited advice, it's something we all get in the habit of, like, oh, well, you know what you need to do? You need to call this, and have you done this? And it's just like, most often they've probably done all the things that they
Right.
need to do. So if you
Right.
can just hold your tongue and wait, and then also ask before you offer advice, and just say, I have a couple thoughts. Would you be interested in hearing them? Or would you be okay if I sent you an email later with a couple of ideas I had? And you've maybe tried them, but would you be okay with that? Most people would be like, yeah, sure, go ahead, send them over. But unsolicited advice can cause resentment. It can cause irritation, and it can cause disconnect from the connections we so desperately need. So just think about
Absolutely.
whether you're whether you're talking for your own self or you're actually trying to be helpful.
So tell me a little bit about Arise Cares, and I'm curious to know, do you see more caregivers of young children and, maybe even adult children, or is it a lot of people taking care of elder loved ones? Is it just kind of the whole spectrum?
So yeah, Arise Care started out working with children like Isaac, so
Okay.
individuals, kids with disabilities, and we worked through the Department of Human Services. So we did PCA services through the Department of Human Services, and we did that up until our company's been in business for 25 years this year.
Okay.
So it was founded in 2000. So we did that service alone till about 2010, 2012-ish, and then well, probably about 2010. Then because had been caring for my dad prior to his passing away, we decided that aging services would be a good fit. So then we
Yeah.
added in aging services. So we have kind of two distinct branches. One is more individuals with disabilities. They may be children, they may be adults, but it's more focused on people who are in that PCA program. Now it's called something different, CFSS here in Minnesota. I don't know what it is in other states, but so we do that. And then the other side is aging services, and that would be private pay, long-term care insurance, or if somebody's part of the VA Community Care Network, we are
Okay.
affiliated with that.
Okay.
So we kind of have, and that's through the Minnesota Department of Health. So we have two distinct programs. So it's nice because um, the one is more uh, most often, I would say more often families, like family members who are caring for a child or caring for someone, and then they can actually be, that care provider. And then the other side is more hired caregivers that are coming in and working with loved ones, people, whether they are, we do homemaking, we do hands-on personal care. We're not a Medicare agency, so we can go alongside of Medicare, which has worked out well for us because just different rules and
Yeah.
regulations for all the
Yeah.
things. But it's nice because I feel like we can work with a lot of people. A lot of agencies will just be one or the other. So it's nice having both branches, I guess.
And then do you work exclusively with people in Minnesota or can you?
Yep, we are
Okay.
based out of St. Cloud. So we travel between St. Cloud and the metro. So between St. Cloud and Minneapolis is kind of that
Okay.
territory we follow. So yeah, we're mostly a central Minnesota
Okay.
company. And yeah, we did have a branch in Fargo for a while, but we just had trouble. That was probably 15 years ago. Just had trouble finding employees because at that time there was the big oil boom. And so
Sure.
nobody was wanting to do home care work. So we ended up closing that branch and then we just focusing on the Minnesota region. So yeah, we're family owned and operated. I own it with my ex-husband. Our daughter has just come on board in the last 6 months or so as our director of communications and operations. And so it's nice to have a family connection. And obviously we all it's important to all of us because of our journey with Isaac. And
Yeah.
so it's been a part of our life for a long time.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your book and how people can connect with you and get a hold of a copy of the book.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Still I Rise, A Guide to Navigating the Caregiver Journey is a true labor of love, honestly. I've thought about writing a book for probably 10 years and then finally last summer dove in and it was published in February and it is I call it a braided tale. So it's part my story and as being a caregiver and a care receiver. It's a bit of a cautionary tale, the things that I didn't know that I would like people to know and do better at. And then also it has the space of being a workbook. So each chapter has reflection questions and journal prompts and things like how to build a care team, looking at self care, the emotional aspects of caregiving. It talks about advocacy and communication, how you can better advocate for your loved one. And then interspersed throughout it are stories of my journey with my dad, my journey with my son, my journey as a receiver of care. So it really looks at it from a pretty unique perspective. I think a lot of people write caregiving books because they're caregivers or they are social workers or they work with caregivers. But I think it's unusual that somebody has had both a caregiver and care receiver roles. So I think I try to make sure that I address things in the book of making sure that you include your loved one in the planning if they can be included. I mean, not everybody can,
Yeah.
but we want to, make sure and honor that person's journey. So things aren't just being done to someone. or for someone, but with them.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm really excited. It's doing well. It's been a great platform for me as I speak to get out to different audiences. And now, like all of our caregivers that come through Arise Cares that are hired, everybody gets a signed copy, and
Nice.
it's kind of a nice way for them to understand a little bit more about the history of our company through the lens of how things were for being a parent to Isaac, but also for them to know as they're going into homes some of the things that caregivers might be experiencing, the family caregivers. And realistically, they're probably caregivers themselves, whether they're
Sure.
parents or they've got their own parents. So it's just kind of a win-win for everyone. People can find me on social media at Rise with Melody Vocal for Facebook and Instagram. My website is melodyvocal.com. And my book is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And by the end of the summer, it should be available as an audiobook as well. I'm in the final edits of the audiobook. I did not narrate it. I hired a narrator because like
that was going to be my question.
So. Yeah, that was I wanted to initially, and then I was speaking with my publisher, who is also the one who published the other parts of the book, and she's like, you can. It's just a lot more labor intensive, and if you're not a trained person who does this, it's just like it was the path of least resistance and less effort, and still getting it out in the world, because I'd rather have it out and available to people than be concerned whether I was the one who was sharing the story or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm excited to dig into this book. For our listeners, I will leave all of Melody's information in the show notes so you can connect with her online, get a hold of the book. And then if you're listening and have EFR's EAP benefit, don't forget you have access to great support resources. We have counseling and life coaching, child and elder care resources, and we have a peer support platform called Togetherall, where you can connect with individuals who are going through similar journeys in life. And so I will also leave some information about your EAP benefits in the show notes as well. But Melody, thank you so much for this conversation. It was so great to have you here. And I'm excited I would love to meet you in person someday. And
yes, I would love that too. We're not far away.
If I'm ever up north, or if you're ever down south, we will connect. But I'm very excited to dig into this book and really appreciate your time and expertise on the topic.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and I'm looking forward to more collaboration in the future. And folks, remember, all you have to do is take the next best step to keep rising.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Emotion Well. Employee and Family Resources is a 501c3 nonprofit organization located in Des Moines, Iowa. We support communities, workplaces, and schools with comprehensive behavioral health services. If you would like to contribute to our mission, please click on the donation link in our show notes.